So according to the UK government, the current spend on AI is around £46 billion today. By 2025, it could be between 80 and 100 billion pounds, and then by 2040, it could be as much as 300 billion pounds. Anything surprise you with that? Is that kind of what you expected?
See, those numbers seem phenomenally large. £300 billion seems like an awful lot of money, particularly when what we're talking about in those figures is the cost of labour predominantly. But actually, when you think about it, AI is touching every part of industry and every part of our lives. So it's not really all that surprising that it's forecast to become such a big industry. And then when you think about what's required to power that industry, it's people. It's skills, and it's the people who are building the systems that are going to power those industries.
Yeah.
So those figures are huge, but actually not all that surprising when you think about it. I think the challenge is that we have to meet the aspiration for an industry of that kind of scale with skills to match, and I think there is a gap we're seeing widening in our ability to go and meet that challenge.
Okay, so how do you think an organisation would hire the best kind of AI and data talent? What do they need?
See, that's really interesting. I think when you look at, particularly if you're looking forwards to 2040, it is AI and data talents. We need more mathematicians. We need more people with a broader set of skills, not just in mathematics, but also in computer science and systems engineering, and kind of where those things, there's a kind of intersection between those which is missing. I think we need or our organisations to look at how we approach the diversity of those hires much more carefully than we are at the moment. I think particularly when you're looking at roles like data scientists, where those people are responsible for looking at trends in data and for building predictive models over data, it's very important that we have proper representation in the people building those models. But also I think it's interesting to reflect on, say we roll forward to those big numbers for the size of the labour market in AI in 2040, it's not just going to be engineers and it's not just going to be mathematicians, it's going to be everybody else for whom these systems touch. So project managers will need a background in what we mean by AI. The whole labour space is going to be changing to reflect actually this kind of new breed of technology.
Yeah. So what does a typical team that would be implementing an intelligent automation project look like? What kind of qualities are important in terms of the whole team? What do they need to have?
So I think a lot of it is very similar to the sorts of roles that you would have in a traditional software environment. So you might have project managers and software engineers, data scientists, those sorts of people. I think there is a different kind of skill set required for the sort of critical analysis that those teams are going to need to be taking, either of data or of the way people are thinking about problems. I think it's also interesting as you see more, particularly no-code type tools reach the market, the kinds of skills that are needed are not just kind of the things that you might think of, so software developers and data scientists. You also have the opportunity for people who haven't got a formal background in software engineering to be part of the process of building these kinds of tools. So intelligent automation engineers are people who don't necessarily have a formal training in software engineering, but can still use tools that can elicit and structure knowledge. Now, for those people, you need quite analytical, logical ways of thinking about subject matter, but that's a very different skill set to needing to be a data scientist, for example.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I want you to imagine it's 2040. What will the organisational landscape of AI skills look like in 2040? What kind of skills will become important, and what kind of skills may become less important?
So I think that's a good question. At the moment, a lot of investment and a lot of the skills gap is in kind of data science type skills, and that's partly because a lot of organisations are starting to see the benefit for these kinds of technologies and for automation and artificial intelligence in their organisations. So they hire technical people, technical roles to come fill those gaps. If you roll forwards to 2040, say, those roles will still be in demand, of course, but there will be I expect to see more no-code type platforms for citizen developers, for people who are maybe the current subject matter experts within organisations will now be empowered to come and build tools that can free their expertise in whole new kinds of ways. So the kinds of people who we would call intelligent automation engineers, people who have that kind of critical thinking expertise, business analysts, people like that, will come to the fore because they'll have platforms available to them that allow them to do the kinds of things that right now you need data scientists to go do.
Yeah, so I guess then much of the AI talent in 2040 could well be made up of people that currently now are in very different roles.
Right, yeah, absolutely. And yes, I think we've seen that change substantially as we've seen computerization over the last 2 decades become just the norm in the way that we all do business. And I think everybody's roles have changed, and they've changed in ways that were probably quite hard to predict 20, 30 years ago. And I think that we're going to see a continuation of that change as we go from computerization through to more automation of thinking kind of jobs, of taking these large amounts of data and making predictions from those, how we turn those predictions into decisions through these kinds of platforms. And that means that the roles that people are doing will be radically different from the kinds of things that people are doing today.
Yeah, definitely. So thinking about Rainbird and the kind of current how we train our intelligent automation engineers currently, and what a typical journey looks like, do you think that will change dramatically as we kind of go through the years into 2040?
So I think we'll probably see that a lot of the way that we are training intelligent automation engineers, the kind of people we look for, aren't necessarily people with that formal background in software engineering. I think as we go forwards to 2040, we'll see more of that. We'll be looking for people who have more sort of business analyst kind of skills, so people who are able to look at a problem in the round and break it down to smaller parts and understand how those parts interplay with one another, and then use a platform like Rainbird to come and tie those things together and turn it into something which is an automation. I think a lot of that also is about empowering people who hold the subject matter expertise. So these people will be training others and working with others in using platforms like Rainbird.
Yeah. And so, again, thinking about Rainbird, what do we look for when hiring AI skills? So, and furthermore, kind of how can an organisation ready, grow and develop its people to be able to perform AI skills moving forward?
So I think there's 2 parts to that question. I think there's the kind of technical AI skills. So that's people who might be data scientists or software engineers, and I think there's quite a lot of overlap a lot of the time. And I think the kinds of people who we look for are software engineers, experienced software engineers who can come and work on platforms like Rainbird, people with a mathematics background. So there's the kind of this intersection between more kind of formal mathematics and software engineering, which is going to become increasingly important for the kind of technical AI skills. I think on the other side, for the kind of intelligent automation engineers, the kinds of people we look for are kind of business analysts. They're people who have a background in being able to understand a problem and take it into its smaller parts. And I think it's important for every organisation to consider the role of their people in the light of these growing citizen developer no-code platforms like Rainbird that allow anybody to come and build these kind of models, and to think carefully about what that might mean for their people and how they can nurture the skills required to operate those kinds of platforms as distinct from, oh, well, if you want to do this kind of automation, you need to be a software engineer, because that's not the case anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so do you think the UK has an AI talent shortage? And I guess, how can the UK government assist with it? So is there some kind of link to the national AI strategy, or?
So there's definitely a talent shortage, particularly on the kind of more technical roles, and I think the skills gap is widening. We are a way away from being able to address, particularly for sort of data science, mathematics, computing, software engineering kind of roles, there is a widening skills gap. I think the National AI Strategy talks a lot about ways that we might approach solving some of that problem. There are these things like masters conversions that they're talking about, which I think we would definitely welcome as a good route towards solving some of that problem. The National AI Strategy looks at how we might tackle some of the diversity problem as well, which is very welcome, and also how we might bring in expertise from other parts of the world. There are new visa routes open to the right kind of talent coming in to help to solve this kind of the AI gap, skills gap. I think we have to be very careful that we are able to retain the talent that we're growing in this country, and that's never been more true than it is right now, particularly with the increase in remote working that we've seen over the last couple of years. And I think that's going to continue regardless of what happens with the state of the world right now, and we have to make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep the UK as an attractive and competitive place for people who have these key skills that we really need to be building.
Yeah, definitely. So do you think higher education should or could do more to kind of ready people for the future?
So I think there is definitely a role for higher education, and I think a lot of these conversion courses are a good way of approaching some of that gap. I think being able to apply these skills in a practical context is very important, and the more that higher education can work with industry to make sure that the skills that are being trained, are being delivered, meet the demand of industry is going to be increasingly important, particularly if you look at those very large numbers that are being predicted for the size of the growth required in the labour market by 2040.
And so how could an organisation take their people on the journey with them as they think about what they need to, kind of getting ready for the future and for this exponential growth?
So I think it's interesting, isn't it? I think there remains a lot of scepticism around AI and automation. It's understandable that people are nervous of what automation might mean for them and for their jobs. I think one of the interesting things that we can learn from the last 20, 30 years, particularly of computerization, is that people's jobs have changed substantially anyway, and actually we've seen a lot of what we might not recognise it really as automation, but a lot of the way people's roles have changed in the light of computerization has been very substantial. And where organisations have been successful, it's been taking their staff along with them on that journey, not imposing this on people, but actually this is an exciting ability to upskill people in new technologies and new ways of working, which are coming for everybody. So if we can work with the labour market to bring these new skills, then actually that's another way that we can address some of the skill shortage.
Yeah.